Hello, people, and welcome back to Connor Reads. Today we have one that I've been really excited for. I follow a few people who do reviews on YouTube, fantasy reviews, and this is a book and a series of books that is talked about all the time. So I've started with the very first one, as it always should be, obviously. Now, this series is very long. I believe there's 14 books, and each book is close to 1,000 words. It's written by somebody called, I have it right here, Robert Jordan, and it's called The Wheel of Time. Is the first book. So how I'm going to do things today is there are going to be some spoilers because I couldn't read such an awesome book and not talk about some of the things that happened. However, do not be afraid. If you haven't read the book, I will give a clear warning before the spoilers come in. So I'm going to start off with a brief summary, some things I liked, some things I didn't like, and then I'm going to move into the spoiler section. So let's get to it. So a brief summary of this book. Now, this book starts in somewhere called the Two Rivers, or Emond's Field, and we start off really with like a prologue. There's two prologues in the version that I have. One is from Egwene's point of view, and it's when she's very, very young, and she notices that a lot of ravens are watching the boys, and the boys are really young as well, barely teenagers, do their work, and that's like one prologue. And I believe that might be specific to only this book, but I'm not sure. I'd have to do some research because this is obviously a later version, because these books were written in 1990, this first one, which is 32 years ago now. The second prologue is incredible. It is about the Dark One facing off with somebody called the Dragon, and it's very confusing. There's a lot of magical systems and things that happen that I have no idea how they work. So many names thrown in there, and I really didn't understand much of it, but you knew that it was an incredible scene, and the dialogue and the description was fantastic. And that scene is definitely not for me to enjoy now. I really believe it's probably something for me to enjoy several books down once having understood the world and the magic system more and coming back to it. So we begin our journey in Two Rivers. Like I said, it's a smaller town cut off from most of the rest of the world. Not many people come to visit very often. And there's three, I would say, main characters that we have. We have Mat, we have Perrin, and we have Rand, who's going to really be our main singular character that for the first book at least we see most of the story through his eyes. Alongside them, we have someone called Nynaeve, I believe. It's tough to pronounce these names. I haven't checked them up. And then we also have Egwene. Nynaeve is like the village wisdom. She's a young woman given a lot of power in that village. And then Egwene is like her prodigy, so to speak. And they all live in Two Rivers. So in Twin Rivers at the start, we're preparing for Beltane, which is a big celebration. I believe it happens every single year. And you have several people come to town. You have people like peddlers, and you have people like gleemen. And what a peddler is someone, you know, selling wares. And a gleeman is somebody who comes to tell stories and sing songs and entertain as a whole. And they haven't had one in a long time. But this year they do. And his name is Tom Merrilin. And he comes to visit, which is already exciting for Beltane. However, alongside that, we have two more strange visitors who, and that's a big deal in this small town. We have Moiraine, and we also have Lan. Now, Moiraine has a touch of something different, a bit more magical. She wears silk. She looks like someone very important. And then Lan, everyone says, looks like a warrior. So it's already going to be a Beltane to remember. And the world that Robert Jordan creates is a high fantasy world. So, of course, they run into some troubles. The Dark One is brewing up all kinds of issues. He sends some of his servants, some who are more beast-like than man-like, some who definitely have magic touches, all of them evil for sure, and they start to cause a lot of problems in this town. Moiraine and Lan tell the boys that, well, this group of evil and darkness, they are coming for you. So the boys essentially flee the village with these people, Moiraine and Lan, to try and save their friends and family, which is a noble cause. However, when they go to flee, Egwene decides she's going to come along with them as well, and so does Tom Merrilin, the Gleeman, which was very, very exciting. You always need somebody of those entertaining, knowledgeable types on these journeys. So they do flee the village, and later on, Nynaeve does come and join this adventure as well. And so our story begins, and it actually reminds me a little bit of Lord of the Rings and the Fellowship of the Ring, where they start in somewhere beautiful and then they travel across a world. So we go traveling across Robert Jordan's world, and must I say, it's a beautiful world that he creates. He is so eloquent in his descriptions, and he clearly had such a clear vision of this world and what it was going to be, and I was completely engaged in it. So within this first book, as they travel, we meet traveling pacifists, we meet wolves, we meet lots of just regular citizens, which helps to, and small towns, which helps to flesh out the world. We meet some high-ranking individuals, we meet some magical beings and some evil ones as well, some beggars, some queens, and overall it's just an incredible high fantasy story that I cannot recommend enough. And what the most exciting part of it is, that it is only book one of something that's going to be a long and exciting, for me, committed relationship and adventure. So I'm going to kick off with some things that I didn't love about this book, and there weren't many, but the first thing was very superficial, and this is the version of the book that I purchased. I think I got the worst looking version of this book. I watched a couple of other people review this book, and they have beautiful versions. However, I have noticed that I can buy some really pretty covers for these books, and I'm going to treat myself to those once I've read the entire series or cycle, or whatever you describe a 12 or 13, 14 book series as. One thing that I did love, so we're going to go didn't love and then into did love. One thing I did love was how many books have clearly taken a ton of inspiration from this book, and then obviously, you know, this book took some inspiration from Lord of the Rings, because who doesn't in fantasy? Just to give you some examples, some of the books behind me. So we have Paolini's young adult book, I believe it is, books, The Inheritance Cycle. A lot of the start of this story reminded me of Aragorn finding the dragon egg. Even the word dragon is used again. Having people take him on a journey, take him on a quest. And his father, Tam, reminded me a lot of Bronn. Also the magic system and the Trollocs reminded me a lot of Urgles as well. And I'm sure further and further down we'll see more times that Paolini took a lot of inspiration from Robert Jordan. The second thing is, and I can't give too much away here, but Perrin, his experiences really remind me of, I believe it's another young adult book by Michel Paver, called Wolf Brother, and there's a whole series of these books, and it has the element of, you know, communicating with animals, and it has the element of being able to dive into an animal's mind and learning a bit more from things from their point of view, which is always super interesting because they always have a different take and different examples of things. So if you are looking and you've already read these books for something that maybe is similar, I would recommend certain elements of this book being similar to those series that I've just talked about there. So another thing that wasn't my favorite, that slightly disappointed me, was there's kind of like two sections. So the first section where they all set out, when they're all together, the speed of the book was difficult for me to plow through. And I think the only reason for that is because there's so many mentions of like names, of places, relationships, exciting things that happen in the world, and we're trying to fit so many storylines when there's like 7 or 8 of them moving together at the same time. I just felt like there was so much going on before I had a great relationship with any of the characters. And for me, that section of the book was hard for me to power through, and sometimes I wasn't that excited to read it. It's not that I hated reading it at all. I wasn't losing sleep over being excited to read it, if that makes sense. I wasn't willing to ruin my sleeping pattern for it. Having said that, one of the things I loved was there's this part in the book, and I'm sure you won't mind me saying, where they do split. The squad gets broken up, very much like Fellowship of the Ring. They get broken up. And the pacing for that was incredible. I learned so much more about the characters and all of their trials and tribulations. We got to learn a lot more about. There was more explanation, more background story given. So I actually felt like I knew who I was dealing with, my main characters. I got to live in their skin a bit more, which is what reading is all about. I could see the world from their perspective. But also, I understood more about what it is they were trying to do, and I could just live it a lot more, and it felt like me and my friends going on an adventure, whereas at the start it felt like I was just on the cusp of something, and I was just watching this group of people go through stuff without really understanding it. And I'm sure that's probably how Robert Jordan decided to write it. I should probably feel like, you know, the boys felt like they don't understand things and things are moving fast. But once they had broken up and I got better relationships with the people, oh my God, I couldn't put it down. I was willing to lose sleep, and I did for several nights reading this book. So another thing that slightly disappointed me, and it often goes like this with fantasy characters, is some of the most interesting and powerful characters, which was definitely Moiraine and Lan, the people who had come to guide the boys. Obviously, they needed to be powerful for this to work as a book, otherwise, because the boys are pretty clueless. They're so aloof. They're hard to like. It's difficult to build good relationships with them, even throughout the course of the entirety of the book. And oftentimes powerful characters are like that. And what I'm going to liken it to is, again, Paolini's inheritance cycle. The elves from that inheritance cycle, they're so much more powerful, and they live for longer periods of time, and they've just seen so much more that it's hard to build relationships with them to begin with. However, as you understand more about their history, their past, their power systems, and their ethics and morals as a group, then it becomes great to build relationships with them. But we just didn't get to that point with Robert Jordan's first book. So I am excited to build relationships with them further down the line. I did not like how difficult it was to like those characters. It's not that I hated them, it just, I didn't know much about them throughout the course of the book, but I think due to their powers, it was kind of like a necessary evil. Another thing that I did love was how fleshed out the world was already. And I've been told by a few people that it's not actually fleshed out in this first book. It gets much bigger, but I loved it already. Like, there were so many moments where we met smaller villages, small farms, individual farms, big villages, big cities, barren wastelands, just a little bit of everything. And I feel like this universe is going to be so amazing and just deep. My final comment before we move into the spoiler section, and this one is a bit of a love-hate, so I don't know whether to put it dislike or like, but I just feel like there is so much depth to this universe, the magic system, so much depth to the lore, the different royalty lines, the different races in it, different time periods, and it looks like it's going to be so complicated. And he's obviously, Jordan is, Mr. Jordan, I should say, is going to bleed it out slowly. But I just want to know it all already. So I'm really excited to learn so much more about this. And I feel like with this book, even though I just said we did learn quite a lot about it, with this book, I feel like I have a torch. I'm in a dark room and I have a torch, and I can just see where that torch is going. Whereas I'm so excited over the next couple of books to be able to turn the light switch on and have a much vaster understanding of how things fit together, the magic system, and just everything as a whole, so that I can join in conversations about this series and really in my head just understand it to a deeper degree. Okay, so this next section is going to be my predictions and just general chit chat about the book and what I think is going to happen in the books moving forward. So there's going to be spoilers, so if you haven't read this book already, pause it here, go read the book, and then watch this next section. If you have, continue watching. So basically, instead of just chatting about the book, which I think has been talked about exhaustedly to exhaustion, I wanted to essentially give some predictions from somebody who has only read the first book, and obviously it is a completed series. And then I want to be able to look back at this once I've reviewed all of them and see just how wildly wrong I probably was. So let's jump into those predictions. My first prediction is that Nynaeve is going to be a badass. She has such a volatile personality that is obviously deep rooted in her moral and ethics, which seem to be pretty on point. And from this first book, it seems like her morals and ethics are fantastic. I think that she is going to end up, unfortunately, not making it all the way to the end of the series, but I think she's going to be really, really, really important and fighting some huge battles that sometimes other people don't want to fight, and maybe even against somebody who isn't necessarily the main bad person. I know that sounds like such a vague prediction, but that's just the vibe I'm getting from her. And I also do think that she is going to break through Lan's trepidations and his cautiousness and whatever reasons he thinks he has for not loving her. And I think eventually he is going to love her, because secretly I think I love her already. My second potentially terrible prediction is I think that Matt will become an enemy. And I know that they are all taverner, something along those lines, which means they're all really, really important for the pattern to weave around them, and they can move the pattern and change it and make a big difference. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're all going to do good. I think that Matt right now is giving off Ron Weasley vibes, meaning that he's just a bit of an idiot. He makes some mistakes, but he also is quite negative and he moans. And I know some of that is because of him picking up the treasure from the location with Mordif and that city that no one should have been in and definitely shouldn't have taken the treasure from, and that caused a lot of problems with him. But I just feel like he's so prone to making mistakes, and he's got a little bit of an idiotic / nasty streak, and I feel like his future is potentially going to end up him being twisted against everybody else. I feel like he could be weak in that aspect, and I also think that he will end up a little bit like the beggar, the peddler, the beggar who follows them around, who is ridiculously frightening for some reason. I don't know why, it just creeps you out. I feel like his arc is going to be something like that, but with a lot more power. He kind of get maybe like Anakin from, Star Wars. He ends up just being evil, but weirdly you still like him. So that's my prediction for Matt. Lan is going to be he just gives me Aragorn vibes. He's going to be somebody who is pure and clean and always does the right thing, maybe even to a fault, sacrifices himself and his own happiness to ensure the world has a happy ending. I think his arc is going to be pretty clean-cut, fantasy classic guy. Perrin is probably my favorite character so far. I love the fact that he can interact with the animals. It really reminds me of that series that I read when I was younger, and I'm sure that series by Michelle Paver that I mentioned earlier, Wolf Brother, I believe it's called Wolf Brother, the storyline is, the arc. He just seems like a good person. You get what you see. I think he's going to be much more in touch with nature. I think he's going to be potentially running with the wolves for a long time and really become his own thing, not affiliated with other people. And I think his vibe is going to end up, obviously not the same, because the Green Man seems like he's one of a kind and he's much older, but something along those lines. Loves nature, always ends up just helping out with a natural aspects of things. I don't know if I'm explaining myself perfectly there, but he just seems like he's going to be a very, very wholesome character that is looking after the natural side of the world. So Egwene and Rand, we already know based on the premonition from Min in the city they were in, maybe Caramellin, that they're not supposed to end up together. And I think that, I don't know who Egwene will end up with, I'm not sure. Potentially Perrin, but no, probably not him. I don't know who she'll end up with. But I think Rand, the foreshadowing is that he will most likely have at least a period of romance with the daughter of the queen, the heiress, who he interacted with, and she will obviously come into power as well, and that means he'll have some kind of hold over the Aes Sedai, the powerful women in Tar Valon. So I think he's going to at least have a fling there. But obviously, I think it's pretty foreshadowed that he either is the creator, well, he is the dragon, of course, but is the dragon the creator, just being like remade? I don't know. I'm sure to find out. So I don't think he ends up with, right at the end, he ends up in a romantic relationship, because how could you be when you're clearly the most powerful dude in the whole entire universe? My next prediction is that Tam, Rand's father, is a badass. I have a prediction that he is the man. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I think it said that his mom is most likely Ariel, the wanderers who wander, and it's mainly just women, and that's where Rand's facial features come from. But I think Tam was a badass. Like, he obviously had that sword. He killed like 4 or 5 Trollocs when they came in, and everyone seems to respect him to like a really, really high degree. So I think it's going to come to pass that he is going to be someone that is extremely important. And also, when the Green Man sees Rand, he says son of the dragon. I don't know if that just means he is going to be the dragon, or maybe that just means he's the dragon reincarnated, but maybe that means that Tam was going to be a dragon, or something along those lines. I think Tam's going to be a badass, essentially. And my final prediction I said that I think Perrin will become my favorite character, but my favorite character so far, hands down, is Tom Merrilin, the Glee Man. And the reason for it is simple. You can't have that many cool attributes without being a main character or a favorite character. It's not possible. So we have, what is he good at? Well, he can sing, he can dance, he can tell a hell of a story. He obviously has some wisdom about him, and low key, he can fight as well. We already know he has a cool story. He was the court bard for the Queen, and he caused a lot of controversy. He's already a wanted man, so he's lived a lot of his life wanted as well. So I just think there's going to be layer and layer and layer and layer and layer of the Glee Man being very important. I think he's going to pop up again, hopefully soon, and we can learn a bit more about Tom Merrilin. And one thing that he did as well is he actually reminded me of a non-magical, much older and much more laid back Kvothe. I don't know if that's how you say his name, from The Name of the Wind. I'm not sure if you've read those books. I'm sure you have if you're a fantasy fan. But he reminds me of that kind of guy, like his singing ability. He also has fighting ability as well. And he just seems intelligent as a whole and wise, which is not something we've seen from many of these characters. They make so many mistakes. There's so many flaws with them. And I think that's why it's going to be set up as such a long series, because they have so much room and space to develop. They're really just three farm boys. Arguably, at least two of them are idiots. I would say Rand and Mat, and Perrin is still just a farm boy as well. So I'm looking forward to the development, and I think Tom is going to be really important to that as well. And so we come to the close. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully I've given you something to think about, or you've at least enjoyed the video. If you've read the whole entire series and you wish to comment on how terrible my predictions are, please don't tell me what happens, because I really want to find out organically. But I am open to you laughing at me. That's okay. I'm going to be reading the second of these books right after a political book that I have lined up. So watch out for the review of that, and then I'll be straight onto the second of these books. I'm hooked, and my goal is to get them finished over the next couple of months. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the rest of your day.